conflicts with that. And but on this occasion, I realized, because this, I don't know, most people haven't seen Where the Truth Lies. I think the viewing figures amounted to about 3, and there are more of you than that in this room. So. But the character was one of a performing duo of the 1950s, which were distantly, very, very distantly based on a kind of Rat Pack, Lewis and Martin kind of duo. And we took it a long way from that. And the Vince Collins character is someone who, on stage, seems like a civilized English gentleman. It's as if Noel Coward had come to Hollywood, or perhaps something of Peter Lawford. But backstage, we see the weaknesses and the corruption and the venality of the character, and actually we see that I'm psychotic and violent, and I'm a drug addict and a pervert.
We had a clip of you attacking somebody violently.
You decided against it.
Yes.
So there we are. But Adam McGowan, who was a brilliant director who directed it, said that is far more shocking and interesting if you are an English gentleman than if you are, Tony Soprano. So, the English gentleman who says, just excuse me for a moment, I just have to go and beat the crap out of somebody, has more impact. And I think that he was right.
Is that same baggage what led you to Tom Ford and to A Single Man?
Probably. I didn't.
Did you know him before he approached you?
Not really. No, we'd met a couple of times. I mean, I don't dwell on my baggage every time I get offered a role, but no, this time I didn't look at it as an opportunity to reinvent myself or to. I mean, I don't really think of things that way. I'm not thinking strategically when I work.
But what made him think of you? Do you think?
You'd have to ask him. He. All I can say is the fact he thought of me was irresistible to my vanity. There's nothing like it. I mean, if you want to get, I don't know how many of you here, if anybody here makes films, but flattery gets you absolutely everywhere. And to open my computer in the morning and see Tom Ford, I didn't give him my email address. I still haven't found out who did. He explained himself in a very elegant and eloquent email. The reason he'd been looking at me in a very piercing and enigmatic way on our brief encounters over the previous 12 months was the following. And he explained the project that he had in mind. And I have to say that the meetings we'd had where they were at parties, one was at a party and one was at a premiere. And the Tom Ford gaze, I mean, you've seen it. Behind the fragrance counter, but this time it was very specific and really quite intense, and I really didn't mistake it for flirtation or a come on or anything. It was sort of inscrutable and difficult to interpret. And this happened twice. And this email explained everything. And he said, I've been looking at you, and it's because I have this in mind. And I am riveted when I see improbable combinations. When I see, a sense of the unexpected. And the fact that Tom wanted to make a film at all was interesting to me. By the time I got to the end of the email, I sensed very quickly that this was not a vanity project. That his choice of material suggested to me that this was something very personal to him. And
did you know the material before?
No. I thought I knew something about Christopher Isherwood, but I had no idea that he'd even gone to LA, quite frankly. I just knew about the Weimar stuff, the German period, which anyone who has a sort of a cursory knowledge of Isherwood knows. And no, I didn't know anything about this. And the idea that his choice of material was a lonely gay college professor in 1962 who's decided to kill himself. It didn't sound like an opportunity to show off his spring collection.
although it kind of was.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think in some ways people have taken shots at him for being who he is and having these extraordinary visual sensibilities. And I think if you didn't know anything about, I mean, we're talking about baggage. If you didn't know anything about Tom's history and you didn't know that he was a fashion designer and you didn't know that he'd been a photographer, you would probably look at this first-time filmmaker and say, what beautiful cinematic sensibilities he has. And instead, I think there's been a great deal of focus on the clothes, and I mean, they're great. But I think they're wonderful at the service of the narrative. And I'm speaking very subjectively here. As an actor, these things help me enormously.
How did you know that he was going to know what he was doing?
I didn't know that he would know. You can't know. You never get, you know, we would love, if we got a guarantee every time that the person you take a risk on will deliver, then every film would be a masterpiece. You know, he was taking a risk as well. I know I've done a lot of films, but this is something I've never been asked to do. I mean, I wish I was on a regular basis in a way, but he was trusting an entire story to me. He was entrusting the life of this man. It unfolds in one day, but it really is an entire life lived out in a day, with every emotion you can conceive of, albeit within a fairly contained kind of carapace that this man deliberately creates for himself. But he wakes up in the morning in a state of despair, and then you see him go through in the course of about 15 hours through rage, frivolity, hilarity, lust, regret, irony, you know, adoration, and sentimentality. And it, you know, Tom, to pick an actor and say, here, this is on your shoulders, and this is my story as well. Because Tom, it was his. He took it much further from, he took it a long way from Christopher Isherwood, really. Christopher Isherwood did not have the concept of the suicide. Tom introduced that. Again, I'm not going to speak for him, but I think that's something that's personal to him. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something very, very stirring, very moving when somebody trusts you utterly with something very, very personal. It's a challenge to reciprocate the trust. And so I'm not saying that's why I did it, because that happened, but this was quite a compelling combination of things. You know, Tom Ford decides to make a film. He's got a reputation for a certain kind of brilliance. Or not a certain kind of, brilliance on many fronts. He not only is a brilliant designer and has a vision, he clearly has enough capacity to communicate that vision, to get things done on a very large scale. He also can run a fashion house, and not just any fashion house, a major one. He's credited with turning the entire fashion industry around. He's also an utterly brilliant photographer. He has a considerable intellect, which is apparent after 1 minute of talking to him. And he has the kind of quality that you engage with. And all those things, you know, those are a lot of boxes that a lot of directors do not tick, quite frankly, however many films they've made. And this piece of writing was unique.
Could you tell at all ahead of time what the rhythm of this film was going to be? Because there's a lot of staring, there's a lot of slow walking, there's a lot of very measured behavior, and you're used to doing some things at a much more, you know, different kind of energy level.
No, well, I couldn't tell. As I said, you can't definitively tell anything, but I had a sense that it would have to be something like that. This did not read as something that was plotty. And I mean, you watch the film, there's no way it's plotty. I mean, that was something to be wary of in a way, but I also don't really like plotty things. I mean, I did a film called Jennifer, which in some ways this resonated with, which is also about grief, and also